My boyfriend wanted me to cut off his brother after he rescued me from my boyfriend's explosive rage. Then he showed up at his brother's house and tried to break in. It started on my 21st birthday, a night that should have been filled with celebration and joy. Instead, it became the moment that pulled back the curtain on my relationship, revealing the darkness that had been lurking just beneath the surface. My boyfriend Dylan and I had been together for 2 years, living in what I thought was a normal relationship with the occasional rough patch. We were hosting a party at our place with about 20 friends and family members, including Dylan's brother Ray, whom I'd known almost as long as I'd known Dylan. As the night progressed and guests began to leave, our party dwindled down to just me, Dylan, Ray, and a couple of my girlfriends. We were all a bit tipsy, enjoying the last moments of my birthday celebration. That's when one of my friends climbed onto our backyard trampoline and performed an impressive flip. Impressed and feeling playful, I mentioned I wished I knew how to do that. My friend encouraged me to try, so I climbed up, stumbled drunkenly, and fell down laughing. Everyone joined in the laughter, everyone except Dylan. I noticed him standing there, his face hardening into a scowl. "Fucking pathetic," he muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. Then he turned to me and said, "We need to speak in private." Confused by his sudden shift in mood, I asked why, which only seemed to anger him more. "Just stop being a stupid cow for a second and come to the bedroom," he snapped. I saw the shocked expressions on my friends' faces, and Ray looked particularly troubled. Not wanting to create a scene, I assured them Dylan was probably just joking around and followed him to our bedroom, though I couldn't understand why he was upset. Nothing had happened that warranted this reaction. Once in the bedroom with the door closed, Dylan unleashed his fury. He called me a disgusting drunk idiot and accused me of showing off like some kind of pathetic wannabe by messing around on the trampoline. He told me I was an embarrassment to him and ordered me to go to bed and stay there until morning so I wouldn't be more of an idiot in front of company. As his tirade continued, his voice grew louder and he began slamming things around the room. Upset and frightened, I tried to leave, but he physically blocked the door, forcing me to sit on the bed. I could hear Ray knocking on the door, asking Dylan to open it. When Dylan finally stepped into the hall, I heard the brothers arguing. Moments later, Ray entered the room and told me to come with him. By this point, I was sobbing uncontrollably. I've always hated confrontation, and this explosion seemed to come out of nowhere. I nodded and followed Ray without question. He made sure my friends had left safely, then called us a taxi. While we waited, he called their mother and briefly explained what had happened. I don't know where Dylan went, but he remained somewhere in the house as Ray and I left. In the taxi, I continued crying while Ray comforted me. We arrived at his apartment, where he lived with a couple who were incredibly kind to me. The female roommate lent me clothes to sleep in, and Ray insisted I take his bed while he slept on the couch. Though I was emotionally drained and confused, I eventually managed to fall asleep. The next morning, over coffee with Ray and one of his roommates, Ray asked if Dylan had behaved this way before. I admitted that Dylan did have a temper, especially after drinking, but he had never exploded over something as insignificant as me playing on a trampoline. I felt embarrassed knowing Ray and my friends had heard everything Dylan said and told Ray I should go home to sort things out. He was concerned about me returning so soon, suggesting Dylan might still be angry. When I insisted I needed my clothes and university materials for the next day, Ray reluctantly agreed to drive me home, but waited outside for a few minutes in case anything happened. Finding the house empty, I assured Ray I would be fine and began cleaning up from the party. When Dylan finally arrived, he seemed calm enough, so I suggested we talk about what had happened. Instead of addressing his behavior, Dylan made a shocking demand. "I will discuss that with you after you delete Ray's phone number. You won't be speaking to him again." Confused, I asked what Ray had to do with our conversation. Dylan declared that Ray had disrespected him by interfering in our relationship, and that we were cutting ties with him. He refused to discuss anything else until I complied with his demand. I told Dylan this was unnecessary. Ray had only tried to help me because Dylan was acting threatening, and I would have done the same in Ray's position. Dylan didn't like this response. He yelled, called me names, and stormed out of the house. Hours later, he texted, "I am sorry for yelling, but you need to respect what I want if you want the same in return. This can't be one-sided. Delete Ray's number, and we will finish the conversation. Love you." I replied that I needed time to think and would be sleeping in the spare room. When Dylan came home very late, he opened the door to the spare room and turned on the light, but after seeing I was awake, he simply slammed the door and left. The next morning, after Dylan had gone to work, I received a text from Ray. "Hey, I hope you're okay. Look what Dylan did the other night is really not all right, and I think you should get out of there for a while. I've talked to my roommates, and it's totally fine for you to crash here until you figure out what you want to do. I was torn between doing as Dylan asked by cutting contact with Ray or accepting Ray's offer of temporary shelter to clear my head. I worried that staying with Ray would destroy any chance of fixing things with Dylan, but something about Ray's concern resonated with me. After carefully considering my options, I decided to text Ray back and ask if he knew whether Dylan had behaved this way with previous girlfriends. Over a series of messages, Ray revealed that Dylan had frequently yelled at and belittled his ex-girlfriend in front of others, and some family members suspected worse was happening behind closed doors. After that relationship ended, the ex had posted on Facebook claiming Dylan had hit her, verbally abused her, spied on her, and deleted contacts from her phone without permission. When questioned by his family, Dylan had insisted the physical abuse allegations were false, claiming his ex was trying to cover up her own infidelity. He admitted to yelling but said she did the same just as often. While his family had accepted this explanation at the time, they remained wary of Dylan's behavior, with Ray making a particular effort to keep an eye on things. The ex-girlfriend had even called Ray about 6 months into my relationship with Dylan, asking him to help me if anything happened. Ray hadn't been ready to believe Dylan would physically abuse anyone at that time, but promised he would watch out for me. After witnessing Dylan's behavior at my birthday, Ray became convinced Dylan was likely to become physical, which is why he had stepped in. He emphasized that even if it never went that far, I shouldn't tolerate how Dylan treated me. Ray's revelations, combined with the support and advice I'd received from friends, convinced me I was in an unhealthy relationship. I decided to stay with Ray temporarily while figuring out my next steps. With Dylan due home soon, I quickly packed essential belongings, valuables, and school materials before Ray picked me up. I left Dylan a note saying I was leaving and did not plan to return except to retrieve the rest of my things. I didn't tell him where I would be staying and suggested he communicate through his mother rather than contacting me directly. At Ray's apartment, I alternated between crying and feeling immense relief. Ray and Dylan's parents came over with dinner, showing incredible kindness and support despite the awkward circumstances. We were in the middle of the meal when my phone rang. It was Dylan. Everyone agreed I shouldn't answer. After my phone stopped ringing, Dylan called his mother. His father answered, and even without the speakerphone on, we could hear Dylan yelling. When the call ended, his father told us Dylan was coming to Ray's place, blaming Ray for everything. Ray began receiving threatening texts from Dylan, who claimed he knew I was there and was coming to get me. Ray warned him that if he caused trouble, they would call the police, but Dylan ignored this. About 15 minutes later, Dylan arrived, driving across the lawn and nearly hitting the mailbox before getting out and starting to yell. Ray and his father went outside while I stayed inside with his mother. Dylan began yelling toward the house that he knew I was there and demanding I come out. When I didn't appear, Dylan ran around to the back patio. The screen door was locked, but the solid back door wasn't. He began hitting the fly screen, trying to break it, while yelling that if I didn't come out, he would destroy all my belongings and log into my school accounts to cause problems. Ray and his father tried pulling Dylan away from the door, but Dylan started throwing punches. Worried someone would get hurt, Ray's mother and I went to the inside of the back door. When Dylan saw me, he renewed his efforts to get to the door, shouting that if I didn't get in the car with him, he would kill himself. His mother said she was going to call the police. Eventually, his father managed to drag him to the front yard and ordered him to leave. Dylan finally got in his car, spun the wheels tearing up the grass, and drove away. I felt terrible that Ray's rental property had been damaged and his family upset, but they remained incredibly supportive. I spoke with the police, who said they would talk to Dylan about the incident and advised me about obtaining a restraining order and retrieving my belongings safely. Meanwhile, Dylan had taken to Facebook, falsely claiming Ray and I had been having an affair and posting cropped, blurry pornographic images from the internet that he claimed were us, saying he had caught us in the act. None of us responded to these posts, focusing instead on keeping me safe. Ray promised he or his male roommate would always be at the house in case Dylan returned, and they spoke with neighbors who agreed to watch for Dylan's car. In the days that followed, I began exploring student housing options at my university and purchased pepper spray for protection. I considered reaching out to Dylan's ex-girlfriend, but wasn't sure if that would create more problems. What I was certain of was that returning to Dylan was completely out of the question. With distance and perspective, I could see just how dysfunctional our relationship had been all along. Looking back, I realize how fortunate I was to have Ray and his parents in my corner. Their support gave me the strength to leave a situation that would have likely escalated to physical abuse. It's frightening to think how easily I might have dismissed Dylan's behavior as temporary anger, or blamed myself for provoking him. Instead, I found safety and clarity, thanks to people who recognized the warning signs I had been blind to. Though the road ahead seems uncertain, I know I've made the right choice, one that may have saved my life.